Hey, it's Patrick, and today I'm gonna show you how to put a flywheel and rod assembly into the bottom end of your Milwaukee 8 engine. Basically, the reason you would wanna do this is straight up hot rod stuff. We're replacing our flywheel set with what's called a stroker flywheel, meaning it's going to move the pistons farther up and down in the cylinder, therefore increasing the amount of cubic inches that's in our engine. It's also going to be much stronger. This assembly is going to allow us to spin even more RPMs than the stock engine, and we won't have to worry about that dreaded flywheel shift that happens with stock bottom ends when you start to hot rod them. Now for this particular install, it's going to be very, very similar for all Milwaukee 8 powered machines. We're doing ours on a 2019 Fat Bob, so for all the Softail models, this is going to be the same. Really the only variation with the bagger engine is that the bagger engines are gonna have one counterbalancer, while this one will have two. So for all intents and purposes, this is going to be very, very similar. Now we're gonna be starting with a completely disassembled engine. So if you need some help getting there, check out our video on how to disassemble a Milwaukee 8 engine. Couple of considerations before we get started. You're gonna need a few specialty tools. To change out the bearing in the right side of the case, you need a Jim's tool to help you install and remove that, along with a press to go with it. Another thing is you're gonna need a torque wrench that goes at least to 155 foot-pounds. Outside of that, just simple hand tools are gonna do the job. If you have all that stuff covered and you're ready to get started, let's start spinning wrenches. Okay, so to get started, we need to swap out the pinion shaft bearing on the right side case half. S&S recommends replacing that, so that's what we're gonna do. But in order to do that, we're going to need a press and a special tool. Now, Jim's makes a specific tool for Milwaukee 8 crankshafts to get those bearings not only out, but back in. We're gonna take the cup side of our tool, it's gonna face up, we're gonna set it on our press. We're gonna drop our driver through the case half from the cam side going down into the case and press that bearing out. Okay, so to put the new bearing in, we're basically gonna do the reverse of what we just did. We're going to lube up the inside of our case here on our bearing surface. Then we're gonna take the driver part of our tool, we're gonna add this little washer that comes with it. And basically what that does is that sets the depth of the bearing. And on there, it'll say right side down or left side down. If you're working with the right side of the case like we are, we're gonna put the right side part down. And then we're gonna slide our bearing onto that part of the tool. Now you wanna make sure the markings on the edge of your bearing, they're facing the inside of this case like this. We're going to set up our cup piece facing down. We're gonna take the whole assembly over to the press and we're gonna press the bearing back in. So the next thing we need to do is clean up these cases. The first thing I'm gonna do is take off all the case bonding material that's on the edges. We'll get rid of that. Anything that's on the mating surfaces of the cases, I'm gonna clean that off with a little abrasive pad. And then we'll clean all of the surfaces down and make sure there's no debris or dirty oil in there before we start our assembly. Okay, our case halves are all cleaned up, but now we need to check some clearances before we can go buttoning this thing up. So what I'm going to do is I'm gonna put the flywheel assembly in this right side case half. But as you can see, I raised the cases up off the table just a little bit because that pinion shaft otherwise isn't gonna let our flywheel assembly go all the way down into the case. Now, I am gonna use a special tool to drop this flywheel assembly in here. It's a nice little Jim's tool, kind of guides it through this bearing. You can do it without that tool, it just makes it a little easier. So once we get that setting in there, I'm gonna put the pistons on the rods, but I don't need any wrist pin clips or any rings. And I'm gonna put the cylinders on this case half and just attach them with one bolt on each side. I want that to determine my rod angle. We're gonna turn this. I need those pistons in there to kind of set up where those rods are gonna come through here, because we're looking for clearance at these two kind of corners of this case here. We need 60 thousandths, which we'll check with the feeler gauge on either side. If for some reason we don't have that, then we're gonna have to grind that out of there. Whenever changes you make to this case half, you need to do to the other one. All of our clearances are good. We're good to go there. I'm going to disassemble all of this. We're going to make sure everything is clean, because it's gonna be the last time we have a chance to do that. Then I'm gonna lube up all of our bearing surfaces. Okay, so now we have to put the counterbalancers in, and to do that, we want our crank pin at bottom dead center, so all the way down here on the bottom. Why that's important is that's gonna put the little line, or little mark we have to line up with the front, and it's gonna put the 0 marking that we have to line up with the rear balancer towards the back of the engine. So we're gonna take the front balancer, we're gonna put it in here, and we're gonna line up the little line with the line on the sprocket of the balancer. When you go to put these in there, hopefully when you disassembled it, you put something in here to hold those little spring-loaded sprockets together. If not, you need to get those lined up. Like I have a little Torx bit in there. Do the same thing on the back part of the motor, but you're gonna line up the little 0 marks and not the lines. Once those are in, we can go ahead and start to getting this thing buttoned up. Before we put the case halves together, we have to seal them up. So we're gonna take some case sealant. We're gonna put just a nice thin layer on just the right side case half. You want good coverage, but it doesn't have to be super thick. We're gonna make sure we lube up these bearings really good too. It's gonna be a second before oil makes it to all these parts, you know? So you wanna make sure you have both of your locating dowels in this case half before you put them together. Once you're sure your case halves are nice and together and there's no gap there, we're going to finger tighten all of the case bolts. Then we're going to torque them in kind of a spider web sequence to 120 inch-pounds. Then we're gonna loosen them up, and then we're gonna final torque them anywhere from 15 to 19 foot-pounds. Now, if you have a bagger, your torque sequence is gonna vary just a little bit than our Softail torque sequence. We need to make sure we secure our rods somehow so they're not banging around when we go to move the engine case. And then we're going to put our new gasket on the front of our transmission. We're gonna pick up our whole lower end here. We're gonna go ahead and put it in the frame and slide the front motor mount through, but we're not gonna tighten it up just yet. Okay, so we have our transmission case and our engine case lined up. Now we need to bolt these together. There's 4 screws. The short ones go in the top, the longer ones go in the bottom. We're gonna put some red thread locker on those, and it's a 2-step torque sequence in an X pattern. So we're gonna start on the bottom of the left side of the bike, then the top of the right side, then the bottom of the right side, and the top of the left side in the X pattern. We're gonna go 15 foot-pounds on the first go around, then we're gonna go anywhere from 34 to 39 foot-pounds on the second go around. So now we need to install our rear motor mount / transmission mount / swing arm pivot bolt. We're gonna get that in there hand tight. Make sure we get our spacer in. It's kind of important. There we go. We're gonna put a little bit of red thread locker on here, and you're gonna need an 1 1/8" socket to tighten this up. Now, the other side, you're either gonna have to have somebody hold that shaft from turning, or jam a breaker bar or something up against your lift so it can't turn. Otherwise, when you try to tighten this, it's gonna spin on the other side. We're gonna torque it to 25 to 30 foot-pounds. We're gonna back it off 90 degrees, retorque it to 48 foot-pounds. At that point, if you don't have your rear shock or your rear wheel on, go ahead and put those on. Then we're gonna torque it to 154 to 170 foot-pounds. Loosen it up 90 degrees again. And retorque it for a final time anywhere between 154 and 170 foot-pounds. Then we take a T47 Torx. We're gonna torque our pinch bolt to 18 foot-pounds. Up on our front motor mount, we're gonna put a little bit of thread locker on this. We're gonna torque this from 50 to 55 foot-pounds with an 11/16 socket. So the last thing we have to do is take a 3/16 Allen and torque our pinch bolt from 8 to 9 foot-pounds. There you have it, one fresh set of stroker flywheels installed in our Milwaukee 8 powered Softail. Now make sure you check out our other videos as we document this build from stem to stern. We're gonna show you dyno numbers before and after, show you how to put on the big bore kit, upgrade your cylinder head and fuel system. If you have any more questions about the S&S flywheel assembly, you can always click that info tab on your desktop or mobile device. That'll take you to the product detail page where you can read other writer reviews and more specs about that flywheel assembly. If you still have questions, feel free to reach out to our customer service team. They would love to talk to you about your motorcycle and what fits your riding style and budget best. I'm Patrick. Thank you for watching. Go work on those motorcycles.